It's not time to start yet. He's going to give me a thumbs up. Quit being so impatient. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello? Can y'all hear me? They can't hear me out here. Turn me up, man. Oh, I was so frustrated at this congregation. Ugh. Hello? Hello? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're in 3 John. I know you're not listening to me, but I can teach without anybody listening. I like listening to myself. There's only one person other than I that likes to listen to himself more. Can you guess? Can you guess? Yeah. Okay, 3 John, 3 John. 3 John, 3 John. 3 John. I have a green light. That's all my control. Now, if it's not working right, then the person to blame is Chris Lloyd. Oh, that was on the internet, wasn't it? That's for the world. Yeah, I am live. If you're with us this morning, we're glad to have you. Okay, 3 John. Interestingly, 3 John revolves around 3 individuals. Seems to be the structure of 3 John. We have Gaius, and we have Diotrephes, and we have Demetrius. And 2, of course, are examples of the faith. 2 are commended for their attitude and their particular walk, and then 1 is the complete opposite. We have it's sort of like Jezebel. We don't usually name our little girls Jezebel. I don't know really who would because of the reputation of the name. And I don't know if we would name someone Diotrephes. If you were in the church, I doubt you know, my little Diotrephes. Demetrius would be good. I have a Demetrius in my class, actually, at Faulkner. But Diotrephes, no, particularly those who would know such an individual. And one of the things that's interesting about, I don't know, it's either brethren that get off track, which Diotrephes seems to be one of those, or one that has, I don't know, from the very beginning has had ulterior motives. I don't know, maybe he's one of these deceitful teachers that's been talked about, like in 2 John, deceivers who have infiltrated the church. Whatever his background is, it seems for some reason there are individuals who are elevated by their own, you know, being emboldened in some way. And I think one of the reasons that some of these individuals are emboldened is because the lack of the action of the church in their reaction toward the individuals who are disturbing or causing trouble in the church. So we're going to see that in Diotrephes. And the Apostle John, he is an old man at this time, and he has some, you know, pretty harsh words to say. It's kind of almost, I don't think it's, well, maybe it is a little bit humorous to envision it. You envision the old man John. He has the reputation, or at least it's from tradition. He would go to congregations and he would lean on his staff and he would say, you know, brothers and sisters, love one another. And so when he's very harsh against Diotrephes, you know, I have this older man that's going to take his cane over there. He's going to beat the tar out of Diotrephes if he don't straighten up, which seems to be the image that I have in the way that he talks about this individual. So there's going to be a battle. He's going to come, and he's going to face Diotrephes and rebuke him for what he's been doing to the congregation there. You know, it's being a part of a Lord's church is a privilege. It's a gift, and it's not a hobby. It is a way of life. We are the church, and it's not a playground for undisciplined and tyrannical type of people and deceivers who would seek to make crooked the straight ways of God. So I think that's one of the reasons why we find in the book of Acts, the swift rebuke of Ananias and Sapphira. You have this situation in which God comes across saying, look, what we're involved in and truth and all that, it's very serious business. We want to have joy, and Jesus has come to make our joy, more than we have ever imagined. But then again, it's not a sandbox to play around in and not take the truth or God's work seriously. So that's some of the things that I see in how John is responding to these the individuals who would seek to try to corrupt the church in some way. So let's begin reading verse 1 and following. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. For I was very glad when brethren came and testified to your truth. That is, how you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than this, to hear of my children walking in the truth. So what do you think the theme is of 3 John? It's the same as 2 John. And I would say that it's one of the major themes of the Gospel of John that I hear David's going to begin teaching the next quarter. So, the truth is something that one can participate and walk in. And it is something that also can be observed and identified as truth. So that would tell me that truth is not just a subjective thing, a feeling, a notion that I have. It's something that's observable and can be objectively appraised and evaluated. And that's what the truth is. It's always been that way. It's outside of us. We can embrace the truth and assimilate it, make it a part of us and participate in it. But the truth is truth, whether one believes it or not, or whether one wants to obey it or not, or whether one wants to be angry at it or not. It doesn't matter. Truth is truth. It's objective. It's outside of us. It can be seen. It's known. It's there. It can be evaluated. All people can come to the knowledge of the truth. So that's going to play a big part, of course, in this small letter. I find it interesting. Christianity was never construed to be a society that abhors prosperity or abhors this or that. In fact, here in the prayer, do you see John says that not only does he want their soul to prosper, but he hopes that they prosper and are in good health. Christianity is always encouraged. You look at the Old Testament. Was Abraham prosperous? Absolutely. Most of your key players in the Old Testament were very prosperous individuals. What was it about them, though, in regard to their prosperity that was good? What? If you talk under your breath, I can hear you. You know that. I ask a question, everybody goes, I don't read lips. They were humble. Yeah, they knew who was in charge and who gave them. God's the one who owns it all, and they're participants in it, and they view prosperity as a blessing, and they're going to use it for the glory of God. It's only when the attitude shifts that money becomes the root of all sorts of evil. That is, we shift from God blessing us, and it seems kind of ironic. God wants to bless us, but in that blessing, there is a challenge for us to maintain single-mindedness. And it takes, I think, some maturity to recognize that we depend on God. It's not upon the material things. Now, we can do a lot of good with material things. And some of the most richest people in the world have been God's people who have done a lot of things for good. I think using our resources and praying for prosperity and good health are good things. John does it by inspiration. He's noting that these things are proper in their place. It's not money is the root of all evil. It's the what? Love of money. That's the root of all evil. So there's a difference in using it, having the proper attitude toward it, and then loving it, which would be tantamount to what? Greed, which is idolatry. Yeah. If you want to think about modern idolatry, that's what it is. Covetousness, greed, the inordinate desire is tantamount to idolatry in the New Testament. So, I pray that you may prosper and be in good health, even as you're what? Now, this is interesting how it's phrased. I pray that you prosper and are in good health, even as your soul prospers. Okay? So it is, I think, assuming the one who is walking in the light as he is in the light, God has always indicated in the Bible of wanting to bless his children. And of course, I think a lot of the blessings is dependent on our maturity as whether or not we can handle it or not. There's places in the Bible, Psalms, where you might have, I don't want to be rich because I don't want to be greedy. And I don't want to be poor because I don't want to be, a beggar on the street or whatever. So, Lord, just bless me with what I need and all that kind of thing. And that's fine. That's someone that's, but what if God bestows upon you the gift and the ability to make money? I think that ought to be encouraged and used to his glory. Not to shame anyone that might be prosperous. That I don't think that's wise. But for the church not to honor that one above others as if being prosperous makes you, super duper. And it doesn't. You're just prosperous. God's given you an opportunity, a blessing to serve him. But that doesn't make you any better than anybody else because we all serve in our own ways. So, that you may prosper and be in good health. I think it's good to be in good health. Even Paul prayed for peace. It's like we're doing today in regard to Russia and Ukraine. We're encouraged in 1 Timothy for us to pray for the kings and those in authority that we can live in a peaceful and tranquil life. And what do you suppose that is? What would the benefit be of a peaceful life? There might be things that are were unobstructive, maybe, in the sense of God's work and things of that nature. But then there's also a benefit of suffering persecution because that reminds us of some things too. So I think it's kind of like a coin. On one side, you have temptation. On the other side, you have trial or test. Maybe think of it that way. To where will the blessing become? Where will you? God's not responsible for the temptation. He doesn't put a temptation out toward you. It's you that might turn something into something bad. But God can shower us. One of the most interesting passages in the Bible is from Malachi, where he says, trust me and see if I don't what? Yeah, pronounce but open the windows of heaven and shower a blessing upon you that you can't even receive. And this comes in the shadow of them withholding not giving as they ought to. For whatever reason. It might be, we need to not do this, we need to withhold it, I'm financially, challenged, or, whatever it might be. But the prophet Malachi says, God says, you need to trust me and see if I won't pour out a blessing that you cannot even receive. That's God's way of saying, I know you in your situation. So, yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we know the end game. We know that the war's been won, and we just need to trust. So I pray that your soul prospers. I pray that you prosper in any way. And notice one of and I think all of us probably feel like this, that there's no greater joy than to know that your children are walking in the truth. The flip side, there's no greater feeling of being distraught than to learn that your children or child is not walking in the truth, right? I mean, this is a very powerful statement here, and I think it's indicative of John that there is something for people of God in the church in their attitude toward the truth. That's what we want to encourage, is for God's people to walk in the truth. Number 5, beloved. Notice John's known for using the word beloved. Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they are strangers, and they have testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of the Lord. For they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. I think in the use of the Gentiles here, he's talking about non-Christians. There may be some disagree with me on that, but I think what he's emphasizing here is the support of God's work is done through whom? Yeah, not car washes of raising money from outsiders, not sponsored events to raise money here and there. I'm not saying one cannot freely do a car wash and earn some money if they want to, but that's not how the Lord's church as a whole, functions. And it's sending people out. It comes from the free will support and contribution of God's family. That's why, you don't hear pleas. Well, you haven't in the past. I don't know. There may be some out there now. I don't know, but if you watch religious shows and things of that nature, they're always pleading to the audience for support. And that could be a model in business or what have you, but I've always been impressed with our programs that have emphasized, we're not looking for any support. Because the support, they'll always say, is funded by the churches of Christ or what have you. I think this serves sort of as a principle that they were refusing, outside. They wanted to be the ones who, supported and sent these individuals out. And the reason we do that is because these individuals are out for the sake of the name. And when you do anything for the sake of the name, notice the standard. What's the standard? What's the principle? That's the idea. That's the big vision. Sending anybody out for the sake of the name, our participation is to do it in what way? in a manner worthy of the Lord. That to me shows you, from heaven's perspective, the importance of proclamation and the need for whatever it's missions or teaching or what have you. Whenever we do anything for the sake of the name, it needs to be what? Worthy of God. I even think that this could come down to our facility, the way it's used, what the outside looks like, how we present God's people on a very, what we would consider, mundane basis. What would it say about us, since we have a building, if our building was just like holes in the glass and it was caving in and the grass was high and the weeds, but we came here? Would that say anything? Is that, am I thinking wrongly about this? Yeah, it says something about what we feel for the sake of the name. There's something in regard to that and how we conduct ourselves. Now, I don't think that's a justification of building a crystal cathedral. I don't think that's what he's talking about. But I'm saying there's a certain expectation that would be behind in any support for God or anything that we do in the name of the God. If we're going to do it, let's do it well, for the sake of the name. So for people to go out and having to find support from outside of the church, and people can do that through various things in order to preach the gospel. Here, John is saying, look, we need to see how we can support such individuals, and notice that they're committed to going out, and it is a noble task for us to participate in. It's one of the things I remember when Brother Myers was first starting the Antioch Initiative and all that. It's kind of like every time I saw him, it was the Antioch Initiative. He was like an AI, on his suit. AI, Antioch Initiative, not artificial intelligence. Antioch Initiative, and this is constantly. And it was such a novel idea and so simple, reaching the world by establishing and planting churches, and supporting God's people in areas that the church was either weak or not there. We have so many places like that in the United States. When we think of missions, we usually think of foreign missions, and that's fine. But the United States is getting to where others are thinking about us being a foreign mission, which is kind of interesting, how others feel how secular we have become. So anything done for God needs to be done in a manner worthy of the Lord. Now, this makes sense because we're taught by Paul and others, particularly in the book of Colossians, to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. So that's a guiding principle in our behavior and our attitude. Is this worthy of the Lord? Is my haphazardness, my non-involvement, is my, how is my worship? How is my giving? How's my support? How's my prayer? Is it done in a way that's worthy of the Lord? I mean, that's the ideal, isn't it? I think that principle sort of is an umbrella covering a lot of things. Any comments on that? Yes. Mm. Yeah. 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 Anybody else? I wanted to take a little sucker break, so I was going to ask questions. Let y'all know it. No, I'm just like, okay. Look at verse 6. And they have testified to your love before the church. You would do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of the Lord, for they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. There we ought to support such men so that we may be a fellow worker with the truth. That's why we do it. We want to participate in truth. Now he says, I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be what? Okay, now contrast that with the attitude of Gaius and the church there. What is their love? What? God. Okay, I can't hear. Speak up. Speak up. I'm. What'd you say again? Okay. Yeah, you're right. The Gaius and the others were involved, and they loved seeing people participate in what? The truth. Now notice Diotrephes. He says, who loves to be first among them, does not accept what we say. Now think about the, I don't know, how would you describe him and his attitude toward the apostles? Belligerent. I mean, it's just, there's no respect there. He loves to be first. Now, this is very telling. Jesus told some stories about being first. You know, and his principle was the first shall be last and the last first. In other words, what happens is those who assert themselves to the status of wanting to be first are usually lowered. Providentially, they're lowered. Okay, so, you know, they may obtain that, but nobody likes them. You know, someone who is, we're supposed to love ourselves, but then there's a line there where a person's self-love, okay, for what I do and who I am, and even that standard is used. Husbands, love your wives even as you what? Love yourself. So there's something about loving ourselves, treating ourselves right. But there's something wrong about this inordinate love of self. And I think the love here is not the love of the Bible, but it is what kind of love? Huh? It's selfishness. It's one who has become haughty and has elevated themselves instead of letting the Lord elevate them through their humility. So those who are first are going to be made last at some point. It's going to happen. There's going to be a toppling, whether it's at the end of time or next year or something. Those who are lovers of themselves, that is, in an inordinate way of haughtiness and puffed up and all that, they usually fall at some time. Those who are humble and serving and all that, God says those are the ones whom I'll elevate. So he's going to turn it upside down. Whereas in society, you know, you got to push your way up. You know, you got to, you know, you build your life on the backs of others. Well, that's not how it's designed. It may be like that in some sectors of our culture. But here Diotrephes has already prophesied his demise. He's already predicted his demise by his attitude and the things that he's doing. He loves to be first among them and does not accept what we say. Now, who's the we here? Yeah, I mean, John's including himself among, you know, the apostles. What we say. Now, John's not saying, you got to listen to me because, I'm the bad boy here. I'm the apostle. That's not John's attitude. But he has authority. And to reject the authority of the apostles is to reject who? God's, the Spirit's. I think that's the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's the last witness. If one takes opposition against God's word, what are you essentially doing? Who gave us the word? The Spirit did, didn't he? Of course, God did, but the word's inspired by the Holy Spirit, we're taught. He's inspired the word to convict people of sin and, to bring them out of their particular, lost state into a saved state. One who refuses that's the last witness, to who Jesus is. That's the last statement. So if you reject the Spirit's word, you're standing in opposition to that. Yes. Korah, yeah. Yeah. Y'all might want to look up Korah's rebellion. He challenged the authority of Moses, and even Aaron and Miriam did too. And they were punished for it. So, yeah, that just shows you the arrogance of the individual. In Jude, it would talk about, we have this phrase, what is it? Angels feared to tread. What's the whole thing? Going where angels fear to tread. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, going into sort of sacred places. Now, sometimes it's used as a case for courage. I'm going, Captain Kirk of Star Trek Enterprise would say that. We go into places, where angels fear to tread. But in the idea of that statement, it is going or crossing lines that not even angelic beings would do, which is not a placard of courage. It's a placard of stupidity. So, for this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words. And not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive who? The brethren. I don't know. Have y'all ever known anybody sort of like this? Have you? Now, I have, and probably, David evidently has, maybe one or two. I don't know. But I don't know how prevalent something like this is. When I first started out preaching, I was preaching for a small country church that was ruled by a family. One of the matriarch, actually, and the patriarch of that family. They were long members of that church. I mean, 50, 60 years. They were older, but they had their whole family were members of that congregation. And it was okay as long as you didn't ruffle the feathers of any of the family. And it got so bad that we received threats. This was in our early marriage when Sherry was a young preacher's wife, and I was a young preacher. But we would receive anonymous phone calls that would say the main road to the congregation was River Road. And that voice would say, I wouldn't come down River Road tonight. Well, I don't know exactly. They would threaten us. And so then it came They came such a disruption that the church, we didn't have any elders, the men of the church decided, we needed this fellowship, this family, or the head guy who was under all that. Well, guess who was assigned to preach on fellowship, disfellowship, and all that? So, I'm right out of, actually, I'm still in college. So I talked about it, and we were going to do it. And, man, they had their whole family there, and they put tape recorders on the Lord's Supper table. This came right after, remember, when that church was sued. What was it? Was it Collinsville that did it? And it was a big thing among the churches of Christ. This woman was suing the church because they had disfellowshipped her. So there was lots of fear, but, our little congregation said, well, we got to do what's right. We can't have this church, mandating and controlling everything and not allowing God's people to learn and teach and the truth and all this. It's not their church. But it was. That's how they thought about it. So I remember preaching. They put those recorders up there. And I remember, I'm probably, what's my age? I mean, that's when we were in the Hickory Road apartments. So how old was I? 19? Oh, okay. I was that old. I was still in school. I wasn't graduated yet. So I had to be like, so maybe I was 20. Anyway, I was young. I didn't know anything. But I know I was still in school. So on that Sunday, they brought out all the things. Now, before that, we went out and tried to talk to this family. We entered their compound. They all lived together. Had a bunch of, homes there. We pulled in. There was a car full of the men of the congregation. We were going to talk to them, This is before we took, action on withdrawal fellowship, whatever. But once we drove into the compound, the doors flew open and the women came out with bats. You think I'm making this up? Didn't they, Sherry? Now, you believe Sherry, you think I'll be making a preacher story, wouldn't you? That was true. They came out with bats and started to swing those bats on the car to hit the car. And, we said, step on it! And, and the guy who drives the car went, Argh! And we let them all in a pile of dust, and we went back to the church and said, we're withdrawing fellowship. They won't, this isn't Christian. This is, but it was my first experience. And as a college student who was preaching part-time for this church, it was small. And so I got a good introduction to preaching there. But the thing is that was a Diotrephes moment. I mean, it really was. We had spent a long time in patience trying to talk to the family group and the patriarch and all that. And it's just, they wanted to throw everybody out and get rid of it. The interesting thing is, during that time, we grew. Went out there, it was probably about 30 members. We got up to 75. We were having prayer out in the parking lot, all the men, all holding hands and praying before we went out. We had people that were coming to the church from Nashville city limits out there to the country. You know why? They were excited that people were doing God's work during challenging times. They were just, it wasn't cool in that we were facing all this hostility, is that we were on the move. We had a lot of barking dogs that were raising stink in the church. So, that was my first encounter with Diotrephes, metaphorically, through a family. And it hadn't been the only one, but that was actually the worst one because of what happened back then. Doesn't that seem strange? Yeah. What movie would that be like, Dave? No. No. Okay. All right. Okay. Notice what he does. He says, with us wicked words, and not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren either, and he forbids those who desire to do so, and puts them what? Out of the church. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Turn him over to Satan. I guess John had it in mind that he was coming there. The only thing I can gather in regard to that, maybe through the letter, he's showing the two, Gaius and Demetrius, and perhaps he's implying that y'all need to take action, and the church needs to follow these two. I do know that's what Paul did in the book of Philippians when he was facing a challenge with the two ladies that were in a fight, and he asked Demetrius and others to do something about that. I don't know. I only have what the text says. So anyway, it says, either he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out of church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil. You know, John's calling him out. In fact, he just identified him as evil. And I think through Gaius and Demetrius, two individuals that are there, maybe they need a little, encouragement to take action against Diotrephes. Can you imagine? There's probably a lot of fear. There's probably a lot of fear of Diotrephes. I don't know his standing. I don't know his age. I don't know his, family or anything like that. But sometimes people can be quite foreboding. I mean, it's.
There are some people that are so full of themselves that it doesn't matter who you're standing in front of.
Yeah.
They're going to oppose just
Yeah.
because they're in a position of authority.
Yeah. I don't know if he was an elder at one time, and that turned bad. We've had elders sometimes that have become drunk with power, yeah. 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 Paul seemed to be a little bit more forceful than the apostle of love, but yeah, yeah,
I was going to say, his nickname by the Lord is Boanerges.
yeah,
And that spirit comes through in 1 John, comes through here too.
yeah,
He's still forceful.
yeah. So we have this guy who's evidently, he's opposing people, he's putting people out of church that disagree or sides with the other side. Who does that? Who's this guy? I mean, I think he needs to be taken out by his collar and his belt and thrown out of the door. At least that would be what I would like to do. But anyway, there's probably a more Christian way of doing it. I don't know. Verse 11, beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. See the implications that he's making in regard to Diotrephes? Notice there is a structural way in antiquity to bring emphasis to a text. We call it, you can think of it as bookends, and inclusio is the label for it. But Paul frames Diotrephes with two good individuals that represent what is of God, which becomes obvious that the middle is not. If the middle was of God, it would be similar to Gaius and Demetrius. But it's showing you a contrast between, these two bookends of the middle part there with Diotrephes, that this guy is really bad and needs to be dealt with. So, beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. And we add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. Maybe Demetrius is the preacher there. And John saying, hey, let's take action. Maybe that's the implication here. I had many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we'll speak face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. So I think to answer your question, John fully expects that he's going to deal with this crisis, but he's encouraging Gaius and those who walk in the truth in Demetrius to stand firm and oppose what is evil. Okay.